Welcome to Ctrl+Talk. This is Anthony and Kate. Today, we're diving into something you probably use every day, but maybe haven't given much thought to. The Firefox web browser.
It's more than just clicking links. Firefox's story, it's really a fascinating blend of innovation and community and this fight for an open internet.
And we'll be exploring all of that based on an article from UMA Technologies published just last month. It's called A Look Back at the History of Firefox. What stands out to you about Firefox's origins?
Well, you can't talk about Firefox without going back to Netscape, one of the first major browsers. They were the kings until Internet Explorer came along.
Right.
And facing some tough competition, Netscape made a bold move. They released their source code to the public.
Wow.
This means that anyone could see it, modify it, distribute the code. It was kind of a radical idea. And it led to the birth of the Mozilla project, this community-driven effort to create a free and open source browser.
So that's the foundation of Firefox then, this open source spirit.
Absolutely. The initial Mozilla browser was built from that Netscape code,
Okay.
but it was a bit rough around the edges, right? It wasn't really winning over users. So a group of developers within the Mozilla project decided to start fresh, build something truly great from the ground up. And that's how Firefox was born.
So Firefox emerges from this open source movement, but what made people actually switch from the dominant Internet Explorer? Which, came pre-installed on most computers back then.
Right. Well, remember, this is the early 2000s.
Right.
Internet Explorer wasn't exactly known for being user-friendly.
No.
So Firefox 1.0, it launched in November 2004, and it had this revolutionary feature, tabbed browsing.
Oh, wow.
Today it seems obvious, but back then this was a game changer. No more juggling multiple windows, everything neatly organized in tabs.
Tab browsing, wow, that's something we take for granted now.
Right? It's hard to imagine browsing without it. On top of that, Firefox had a built-in pop-up blocker. In those days of intrusive pop-up ads, this was a huge relief for users.
Yeah.
It really felt like Firefox was listening to what people actually wanted.
It was a breath of fresh air in a market dominated by one player. I'd love to know more about that Get Firefox campaign you mentioned earlier. How did they manage to spread the word so effectively, especially against a giant like Microsoft?
It was a brilliant example of grassroots marketing. They tapped into the enthusiasm of this open source community,
Yeah.
encouraging people to spread the word to friends and family. They had these clever buttons and badges that people could put on their websites. It was all about word of mouth, about users advocating for a better browsing experience.
So they harnessed the power of the community to challenge the establishment. I imagine Microsoft didn't just sit back and watch this happen.
They definitely noticed, and thus began the browser wars.
Right.
Microsoft, of course, had a vested interest in keeping Internet Explorer dominant. They started pushing updates, trying to match Firefox's features and win back users.
Yeah, it was a real David versus Goliath battle, wasn't it? This little upstart taking on the giant. And what role did open source play in this battle?
Open source was Firefox's secret weapon. Developers from all over the world were creating extensions, little programs that added functionality to the browser.
Yeah.
Think AdBlock Plus, which blocked annoying ads, or NoScript, which gave users more control over what scripts ran on websites.
Okay.
These extensions became essential for millions, and they were only possible because Firefox was open.
That's incredible. It's like the community itself was building the browser they wanted to see. But even with all that support, I'm sure Firefox faced its share of challenges in those early days. What were some of the hurdles they had to overcome?
One of the biggest issues was performance. As people started using more tabs, and remember, this was a new concept.
Right.
Firefox would start to slow down, hogging system resources. It was a constant struggle to keep up with the demands of this new way of browsing.
The early days of tab overload. We've all been there. So how did Firefox address these growing pains? Did they just keep patching things up?
They did a lot of optimizing, but they also kept innovating. Firefox 2.0, it came with features like a built-in spell checker and better tab management.
Okay.
Then Firefox 3.0, that focused on a complete performance overhaul. They even launched Download Day, trying to break record for the most downloads in 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
And then it came Firefox 4.0, a major redesign with support for new web technologies like HTML5, which was changing how websites built.
Wow.
They were constantly trying to improve the user experience while keeping pace with this rapidly evolving web.
It sounds like a period of rapid evolution, constantly pushing boundaries. But then a new player arrived on the scene, Google Chrome. How did this new competition impact Firefox's trajectory?
Chrome's arrival in 2008, that was a watershed moment.
Yeah.
Chrome focused on speed and simplicity, and it quickly gained popularity.
Right.
Suddenly, Firefox wasn't the only alternative to Internet Explorer.
Right.
It forced Mozilla to rethink its strategy.
So how did they respond to this new challenge? Did they panic?
There was definitely a sense of urgency. They knew they had to up their game. One of the key things they did was introduce Firefox Sync, which allowed users to synchronize their bookmarks, passwords, and browsing history across multiple devices.
Okay.
It was a major step towards making Firefox more seamless and user-friendly, and they adopted a faster development cycle, pushing out updates more frequently to keep up with the competition.
So it became a race to innovate, to stay ahead of the curve. And in this race, did they manage to hold their own against Chrome?
They made some significant strides, but to truly compete with Chrome's speed, they needed a major overhaul. And that's where Firefox Quantum comes in.
Quantum, I remember hearing about that. Wasn't that a big deal?
It was a complete game changer. Released in 2017, Firefox Quantum was built on a new engine called Gecko, designed to take full advantage of modern multi-core processors.
Okay.
This made Firefox incredibly fast, often surpassing Chrome in benchmarks. It also had a sleek, modern redesign, and new features like a built-in screenshot tool and integration with Pocket, a service for saving articles to read later.
Yeah.
It was a bold move that put Firefox back in the game.
So they took Chrome's challenge head-on and came back stronger. This is where things get really interesting for me. In the years following Quantum, we saw Firefox shifting its focus towards something that's become increasingly important today, user privacy. Why this pivot?
The internet was changing. Data collection and online tracking were becoming rampant, and people were starting to realize the implications for their privacy. Mozilla saw opportunity to become the champion for users in this new landscape. They recognized that, unlike some of the other major players, they weren't beholden to advertising revenue, and they could afford to prioritize user privacy above all else.
That's a powerful position to be in. How did they actually put this privacy-first philosophy into practice?
They started by introducing features like enhanced tracking protection, which blocks third-party cookies by default. These cookies are often used by advertisers to track your activity across different websites, building a profile of your interests and behavior. By blocking them, Firefox made a strong statement that they were putting users' privacy ahead of ad revenue.
That was a bold move, especially at a time when many companies were doubling down on data collection. Did this commitment to privacy resonate with users?
It did, particularly among those who are becoming more aware of online tracking and data privacy issues. Firefox became known as the browser that had your back, the one that wasn't trying to monetize your every click and search.
So in a way, they were not just competing on features and speed anymore, but on values. They were offering users a different kind of internet experience, one that respected their privacy.
Exactly, and it's a vision that continues to guide Firefox today, but it's not without its challenges. Competing against giants like Google and Microsoft, who has vast resources and deeply integrated ecosystems, is no easy feat.
That's a story for our next segment. We've covered a lot of ground, from the early days of Netscape and the rise of Firefox to the browser wars and the pivot to privacy.
And this is only part one. It's a reminder that Firefox's journey is about much more than just a web browser. It's about the internet itself, the choices we make, and the kind of online world we want to create. Welcome back to our deep dive into the history of Firefox.
We've seen how Firefox emerged from the open source movement, challenged the status quo, and really become a champion for user privacy.
And now let's explore what the future holds for this trailblazing browser.
Our source material from UMA Technology, it hints at some exciting developments. They talk about Mozilla's commitment to open source and community involvement, and prioritizing user experience over monetization.
Which is refreshing in today's tech landscape, wouldn't you say? So many companies seem to prioritize profits above all else.
It's certainly a different approach. What specific features or initiatives are they hinting at?
Well, they mentioned further privacy features. Remember, they set a precedent by blocking third-party cookies by default.
Right.
Now imagine them taking that even further, maybe giving users, even finer control over their data. What if you could choose exactly which data points websites could access, or even create a personal data vault that you control?
That would be a game changer. It puts the power back in the hands of the user.
Precisely. And think about the implications. It could fundamentally change how we interact with the web, shifting away from this model of constant data harvesting and surveillance.
The article also mentions enhanced service-centric offerings. What could that mean?
That's where things get really interesting. Maybe they're thinking beyond the browser itself, expanding into new areas like secure cloud storage or communication tools. Imagine a suite of services built on Firefox's privacy-first principles, a genuine alternative to the big tech giants.
I can see the appeal. People are increasingly concerned about data privacy, and they're looking for alternatives. But can a project like Firefox, even with its passionate community, really compete against these giants?
It's a David versus Goliath situation, no doubt. Chrome, Edge, and Safari. They're deeply integrated with their respective operating systems and ecosystems.
Yeah.
It's convenient, but it also creates a kind of walled garden that can be hard to break out of.
It feels like a constant uphill battle for Firefox.
It is, but remember, there's a growing awareness of the downsides of this tech monopoly. People are starting to realize the implications of having their data collected and controlled by a handful of powerful companies. They're looking for choices, for alternatives.
And that's where Firefox comes in, offering a different path, a vision for a more open and privacy-conscious internet.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual users. Firefox is open source, which means its code can be used and modified and built upon by anyone. Imagine the possibilities. For governments, schools, organizations that want more control over their data, who want to ensure privacy and security. They could build their own customized versions of Firefox, tailored to their specific needs.
It's like they're providing the building blocks for a decentralized, privacy-focused internet. It's a pretty bold vision.
It is, and it's one that aligns perfectly with Mozilla's mission. They're not just building a browser, they're building a movement. They're showing that there's another way, that we don't have to accept the status quo.
You know, this conversation reminds me of a company we've been following closely, Albion.is.
Oh, I've heard of them. They're a DevOps consultancy, right?
That's right. They help organizations build and deploy and manage their software in a more efficient and reliable way. And like Mozilla, they have a strong commitment to open source principles and collaboration.
I can see the parallels. Both organizations are pushing boundaries, challenging the established way of doing things, and advocating for a more open and transparent approach.
Exactly. And that's what makes this whole conversation so exciting. It's not just about browsers or software. It's about the very nature of the internet, the choices we make, and the kind of online world we want to create.
And speaking of choices, let's shift our focus back to Firefox and the challenges it faces in this increasingly complex landscape. We've talked about the dominance of the tech giants, but what about the evolving needs and expectations of users themselves?
That's a great point. People are using the internet in more ways than ever before, and they expect their browser to keep up. They want speed, they want security, they want privacy, they want a seamless experience across all their devices. How is Firefox adapting to these evolving demands?
They're constantly iterating and experimenting and trying to anticipate future needs. One area where they've been particularly active is in developing new privacy-enhancing features. They've introduced things like Firefox Monitor, which alerts you if your email address has been compromised in a data breach, and Firefox Lockwise, a password manager that helps you create and store strong passwords. They're also exploring more advanced technologies like differential privacy, which allows data to be analyzed without compromising individual privacy.
Those are some impressive advancements. It sounds like they're really trying to push the boundaries of what's possible in terms of privacy and security.
They are, and they're doing it in a way that's user-friendly and accessible. They understand that privacy shouldn't be a burden or a chore. It should be integrated seamlessly into the browsing experience.
But even with all these innovations, it's still a tough battle, right? How can they convince users to choose Firefox over the more established and deeply integrated options?
It comes down to awareness and education and highlighting the value proposition. They need to show users that there's a real difference between Firefox and the other browsers, that it's not just about checking email and scrolling through social media. It's about making a conscious choice about the kind of internet you want to support.
It's about values, ultimately, and it's about empowering users to make informed decisions.
Exactly, and that's where the community plays a crucial role. Firefox's passionate users are its best advocates. They spread the word, they share their experiences, they help shape the future of the browser.
So we've talked about the challenges, the innovations, the vision for the future. But what does all of this mean for the average user? Why should they care about Firefox's journey?
It's about more than just a browser. It's about the internet itself, the choices we make, and the kind of online world we want to live in. Firefox is a reminder that there are alternatives, that we don't have to accept the status quo, that we can demand better from our technology.
It's about fighting for the internet that's open and accessible and respects our privacy.
Precisely. And that's a fight worth having.
But the story's not over yet. When we come back, we'll delve deeper into Mozilla's vision for the future of Firefox and explore what role independent, community-driven projects like this can play in shaping the internet we all want.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Ctrl+Talk.
We've journeyed through the history of Firefox, from its open source roots to its battles with these industry giants and its unwavering commitment to user privacy.
It's been a fascinating exploration of innovation and the community and the fight for a more ethical and user-centric internet.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to shift our focus to you, our listener.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, the future of the internet, it isn't something that's, decided in boardrooms or dictated by by tech giants.
Right.
It's shaped by the choices that we make every day, the browsers we use, the websites we visit, the values we prioritize.
So I'll ask you this. What kind of internet do you want to see? Are you comfortable with the current landscape where data is collected and monetized at every turn, or do you yearn for something different, something better?
It's easy to feel powerless in the face of these massive tech companies, but remember, Firefox's journey is a testament to the power of collective action.
Even a small group of passionate individuals can make a huge difference.
So what role do you want to play in shaping the future of the web? Maybe it starts with, choosing Firefox as your browser, making a conscious decision to support a company that aligns with your values.
Yeah,
Or perhaps it's about exploring other open source projects, contributing to the community, spreading the word.
right.
It could be demanding more transparency from tech companies, holding them accountable for their data practices,
Yeah.
or even getting involved in policy discussions, advocating for regulations that protect users' rights.
So many options.
Whatever form it takes, your actions, your choices, they do matter. The future of the internet isn't predetermined. It's something we're all actively creating.
And as we've seen with Firefox, even small acts of defiance, of choosing a different path, can have a ripple effect.
So I encourage you to think about what kind of internet you want to see,
Absolutely.
and then ask yourself, what can I do to make it happen?
Yeah. This deep dive has been about Firefox, yes, but it's also been about so much more.
It's about the choices we make, the values we uphold, the future we're building together. One click, one line of code, one conversation at a time.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep fighting for a better web.
Until next time, this is Anthony and Kate, signing off.